You're listening to Advice from Your Advocates, a show where we provide elder law advice to professionals who work with the elderly and their families.
Welcome back to Advice from Your Advocates. I'm Bob Mannor. I'm a nationally board certified elder law attorney in Michigan, and we have this podcast to talk about all the senior issues, particularly anything related to long-term care and dementia and all those types of things. I'm really excited about our podcast today. I think it's really interesting. It's a continuing series to talk about how different countries deal with these long-term care issues. And so today we've got Amy Friesen on. And Amy founded Tea and Toast. Amy, first of all, hi, and can you do a quick introduction of yourself?
Hi there, Bob. Thanks for having me. Absolutely. So I run a company called Tea and Toast. We're here in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and we help seniors and their families figure out elder care planning from a standpoint of housing and care purposes.
And so in our conversations previously, we've talked about how there is some distinct differences between how the United States deals with what you call housing and I might call placement. And so we're going to get into that conversation, but tell us a little bit about Tea and Toast, how you came up with that name and what more you do, what services you provide.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. So I developed Tea and Toast after having almost 10 years in the retirement home industry here, which is our private industry for housing, senior housing. And I was really finding that a lot of people were able to find what they needed and they were really, really stressed. Yeah. And so seeing that and seeing this elder care planning industry sort of come online in Canada, it is much bigger in the States from what I understand. So seeing it kind of come online, I wanted to jump in and help. And so I formed up Tea and Toast and called it Tea and Toast after painstakingly trying to figure out what to call it because it's familiar for seniors. Tea and Toast is super comforting. But for those seniors that are eating Tea and Toast, multiple meals, multiple days, it could be a red flag for their family members or their caregivers. So it's really just to get people thinking about it. I kind of say, if you're in the know, you're in the know. So I've been running Tea and Toast here for 11 years now. And we really specialize in elder care planning, which is basically setting people up for success and whatever that success looks like to them, because everybody's different. And so we really go in to try to make a plan, educate people. Most of what we do is education on the industry, how the government part of the industry works, when to move, why to move, how to move, all of that. And then also if they want to stay home, how to stay safe at home, who to recommend to put grab bars in and things like that. So really a full holistic type of service for them.
You said something a minute ago that I'd like to explore a little further. You said coming online in Canada. So I'm wondering what that means. In my imagination, I'm thinking that, and this could be completely wrong, so that's why I'm asking the question, that what you're saying was it was more of a family thing where we were able to try to, take care of our elders within the family. And now it's getting to be more where we have some other options of caregiving. Is that what you meant by that, by coming online? Tell me a little bit more about when you said you thought that the United States had kind of more developed that.
Sure. Yeah. So what you said is true as well, right? We have lots of people that have been caring for their elders for years and generations. What I meant by coming online is that as elder care planners and advocates, the industry here is in its infancy. And so I have a lot of colleagues in the States, and there's a lot more agencies like myself. We're sort of like brokers, right? Mm-hmm. For retirement and living, long-term care or whatnot in that field sort of. And so the US industry in that is much larger. And so here we're just, like I said, coming online. There's not very many of them. They're starting to come up now, which is why I also formed up my national organization as well, so that we could connect the dots for the caregivers and they didn't have to look everywhere to try to find us, because honestly, even me trying to find my own colleagues was difficult. So I can only imagine for the caregivers.
That's very interesting. So like you say, there's, and I'm curious if I'm reading this right or understanding this right. In the United States, there is a whole industry of helping people find the right housing setting, the right, what I might call placement in some kind of caregiving setting. and I have an understanding of how they are paid. So I'm going to ask you a blunt question about how do you get paid for this?
Well, we have multiple ways. We have both. We're a hybrid service. I think we're probably the only one
Okay.
like anywhere. And so in Ottawa, where I'm at, we actually have contracts with most of the retirement homes.
Right.
And
Okay.
so most of our clients that are going through a search our contracts with the retirement homes actually cover it. And so that doesn't really exist anywhere besides here and maybe Montreal. And so
Really?
otherwise, yeah. So otherwise, though, we have paid for service for our elder care planning, our long-term care navigation, different service consulting that we offer.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's how those services that are sort of placement services work in the United States, that they end up the first option that you gave. Typically,
Mhm.
they're paid by the place that they end up renting from, and they get sort of a commission on it. And so that
Mhm.
works out well for the families because then they don't have to come up with an upfront payment, not knowing, it's less scary to them to enter into that. Talk to me about your care navigation, and I particularly want to talk about that because that's a word that we use in our law office. And so, it's unusual, even in the United States, for a law office to have what we call care navigation, where we have social workers on staff and we help with all the decisions around caregiving and long term care and all the things that can happen over a span of time, both from the standpoint of finding care, getting good care, making sure that the care is, advocating for better care, all of those types of things. And so we offer that service too as part of our law firm. And I think that you do something similar. And I want to hear more about what your care navigation service looks like.
Sure. Firstly, that's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that you guys are offering that as well. And it's really kind of akin to what you're saying. We are making sure that people um, not only are covered for the care that they have today, but for tomorrow as well, and however
Yeah.
that kind of fans out. And so lots of people plan, they're completely independent, and they're planning, they want to stay home. And it's like, okay, how do you keep them safe? How do we make sure falls are lower risk and things like that? Then when you're looking at things like progressive diseases like dementia and Parkinson's and things like that, how do we plan for now so they don't have too much care where it feels weird and like too
Right.
much, all the way to the future where they have all of the care they need, and then hopefully not having to move again if they don't want to do that, if we make sure that the plan is there in the first place. The other part is when you're dealing with couples and partners, one often has higher care needs than the other one, and the other one's
Yeah.
often the caregiver. And so how, if they're looking to move, for instance, how do you balance that in a retirement home specifically so that the caregiver doesn't feel like they're living in like a hospital setting
Right.
and their needs aren't being met as an independent person, but the care needs of the other person are being met, and vice versa. We don't want too independent either. And so balancing that as well. And then lastly, from hospital, how do we look at the family unit holistically, including spouses and partners, dogs and cats, being close to family, all those stuff all together? Because when people are discharged from hospital, the hospital's looking at one person as the patient. That's it, right? And
Right.
how do
Right.
we get this person out of hospital? And so we want to look at the whole picture, because if you don't look at the whole picture, another move might be imminent.
Absolutely. That's great. That's fantastic. You probably maybe use this term too. I call that holistic planning. We're looking at the whole picture. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I like what you said there, and I want you to maybe expand on it about, okay, families often are, at least in my experience, families are often, when they hit this crisis, they're most focused on the next 4 weeks. And so I think as planners, we got to be helping the family focus on, okay, but what about 6 months from now? Well,
Mhm.
what about, and so I always ask, and this is again a very blunt question I have to ask my clients, but what do we think is the life expectancy? Because
Mhm.
sometimes they tell me that it's very short, or they really very strongly believe it's very short. Then we're looking at less planning. But if they say, I don't know, it could be 10 years, then we've got to plan out for 10 or 20 years. And so what I heard from you was that part of your planning is not just thinking about today, but thinking about the long-term plan.
Well, when a crisis hits, all hands are on deck. Everybody's in the crisis. Everybody's moving work schedules, moving other schedules. Everybody's in,
Right.
and nobody can really think clearly. And I think that that's the hidden value of businesses like ours, the two of ours and others, that we can keep a clear mind and direct our clients through the actual search process or through the process as a whole, and really bringing up questions that most times they don't think about, right? Because we're asking them about life expectancy in a way. We're asking them about what's going on, what their care needs are now, if there's anything progressive or we should consider. And so by doing that, we're actually planning out further, thinking about all of these different things. Will this person need what's called a two-person transfer down the way? Are they going to be a really heavy care client? Okay, well, this home they're thinking about may not fit. Let's go to this home and then they can stay longer because that's their plan. Or wait, their plan is long-term care afterwards. Okay, maybe we don't need all that care. Maybe we need to have something more so today, and then their long-term care plan will kick in. And so it's all about strategy for the families.
I know that one of your services that I want you to expand on is cross-border planning. And so that's particularly relevant for us here in Michigan because obviously we have a lot of people that go back and forth between Michigan and Canada. And so if we've got people in Michigan that have parents in Canada, that might be something that can be really helpful because it's very challenging because the rules and everything is a lot different and the terminology and everything is a lot different. And so talk to us about your cross-border planning options.
It can be really difficult when the caregiver's not in the same country, regardless of which country. When we have the senior, the family member here, we work with caregivers all over the world, to be honest. And so often they can't be there all the time, right? And so if they're in this transition, they really need hands on, eyes on, someone that they can trust that's going to not only educate them about the system and so that they can understand it in comparison to their own system, because a lot of people think that the systems work the same and they don't. They don't even work the same between provinces, right? So really educating them and keeping them in the loop for each step. Okay, I met mom and dad. This is our next plan. Okay, we did this. This is our next plan. Even to the fact of, if someone is looking to make a move, we can even do a virtual tour. If the family can't get here, we can do a virtual tour where I take them around on my phone essentially and show them as we're touring to really involve them as much as possible. And then the end piece is really connecting all of those dots, right? So if they're not here, if they're not able to be, who's going to do the moving? Is there a house to sell? All of these other professionals to bring them all in to surround the senior and help them out so that the family can have some peace of mind as well.
So, I mentioned that this is part of our series to talk about how different countries handle this long-term care issue. I'd like you to tell me a little bit more. And as we discussed before we got on the podcast here, that every province is a little bit different. And so I understand that you have a national presence in Canada, but your primary focus is Ontario. Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Talk about Ontario. And I know you said that there's sort of the subsidized and the non-subsidized. And so if you can kind of describe those options that you have in there in Ontario.
Sure. So we have a public and a private housing system in Ontario and in Canada in general. And so for the public system, you need to go through a qualifying and you need to be accepted. We call that system our long-term care housing. And so you need to go through those processes. Our wait list here could be as small as 6 months, but our average is about 5 years to get into a long-term care home. Wow. And so the long-term care homes, one of the reasons are financial. The government does cover a good portion of it. And so people can be in a long-term care home in a basic suite for around $2,000 a month, including all of their care, even their incontinence things. And so that's really great for a lot of people who, one, we pay for this stuff in our taxes, but also there's a lot of people that don't have enough money for the private system.
Before we get onto the private system, can I ask you a couple of questions about that?
Sure. Yeah.
So you said that there could be a 6 month to 5 year waiting list. Is that dependent on the facility, dependent on the specific housing option?
So each person chooses up to 5 long-term care homes to put on their list. And so depending on what they've chosen, if they've chosen the more popular ones, and there's a longer wait
Okay,
list,
gotcha.
whatnot. And so we do have a crisis situation that if things kind of go haywire and they need care right away, we have an escalation system as well.
Right,
But many people are on for many years. But the kind of the issue there is that you can't qualify for long-term care until you need the care. And so
right.
then you need to wait another 5 years. So what do you
Yeah.
do? Which
That
is
can
where
be challenging. I just have lots of nuanced questions here. So, could you get on that list and list one of the places that has a shorter waiting list, and then get on a waiting list for the place that you really want to go to later? Or once you're on somewhere, they don't put you on another waiting list?
so when you pick your 5, you kind of rank them, right? And so
Yeah.
if you end up in your third choice, you could still remain on the list for your top choice.
So you could go somewhere that has a shorter waiting list, and then once you get to the top of the waiting list, move to your preferred location.
That's right. But,
Okay.
also as you and I know, a lot it's moving's difficult, especially if
Sure.
you're
Right.
advanced, right? Well, especially if your care is advancing that you are eligible for long-term care, then it might be a good, process to wait for, but it might be too much to make that move when it comes up.
Sure. So then, with long-term care housing and so the subsidized, what are the requirements? Do they look at your assets or income at all, or you just get on the waiting list because you're a citizen of Canada?
For generality, you kind of need to be in that one person transfer. So you need enough
Right.
care that someone's helping you physically. And then if you need the further subsidized, then they'll look at finance.
So tell me more about that. I'm curious about that. It's based on need, and what I mean by that is physical need, right? And then is it based on financial need?
Not to get accepted into
Okay.
the home, but if you want the extra subsidies, one of the rooms we have basic, semi-private, private. In the basic room, there's 2 beds per room, and that is the room style you would go into if, for instance, your social service money that you get, for instance, if you're on a budget from the government, is $1,500 a month. That room is $2,000. You need a subsidy for that. So in order to do that, you need to go into that basic room, and they would look at finance for that purpose to give you extra subsidy.
To give you extra subsidy to lower it below the 2,000?
That's right. So
Okay.
they would, if you're getting it below the 2000, essentially they're taking what comes in every month. So here it's OAS and CPP, like our government pension systems. And so they would take that, the home would take that, and they'd give you an allowance of around $140 a month for incidentals.
Okay. Thank you for letting me ask all the questions. Now talk to us about private pay options.
So private is what's called a retirement home. They're a social atmosphere. So I call long-term care a medical atmosphere more, and social for retirement. And so the retirement homes here specifically, many of them can offer the high care levels that long-term care can offer. It's just private pay. And so in retirement, you're looking at your own private suite, regardless, studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, depending. You can add on care, but you can go in at independent and go all the way up to a 2-person transfer along, all the way up that line. And then you have the social activities, the meals together, the outings, things like that, a bit more of an active atmosphere.
Can you be in a private retirement home and be on a waiting list
Yeah.
for subsidized? I'd like to know a little bit more about you, Amy. What was your personal journey to get to where you are? This sounds like an amazing service and really important for the residents of Ontario. So tell us a little bit more about you and how you got to where you are.
I really wanted to make an impact, and I didn't know what I wanted to do after my university degree. And so I stumbled upon this psychology of aging and into this retirement industry, and I really fell in love with it. I lost my grandparents pretty early in my life, and it was sort of like being around 100 grandparents every single day. And so I really enjoyed that. And then as I moved forward, I also have a marketing degree. So as I moved forward, I really started enjoying that sales aspect and helping people find their new home or their next home. And so I really wanted to do more for that. And I was getting frustrated because clients and families were frustrated because they couldn't find what they needed. And I really thought it could be much easier than what was happening. And so that's really what brought me to opening up Tea and Toast. And when the industry started to develop, for a long time, there wasn't very many of us. There was me and a couple of others. And when it started to develop, then I thought to myself, I really want to be able to connect across Canada, because I have clients that get referred to me, but their loved one is in Vancouver or their loved one's in Alberta. And so I developed Elder Care Planners of Canada, which are a bunch of small businesses like myself with the same mission, all connected together, so that we can work together in a bigger atmosphere and essentially look bigger, right? So that we can help clients with transfers across provinces, but also then we're able to work with EAPs and different things like that. So because they need a Canadian presence, not just one Ottawa business, right? So as much information and education as we can get out there for everyone, but in this industry very specifically.
That's great. I'm glad that you were able to make that national like that and make those connections, because those are so important to be able to provide those services to families where people just aren't all going to be in the same place. And so if you just say, okay, well, once you leave Ottawa, good luck to you. And so it's great that you had that passion to provide that service on a national basis.
Even when people call us and maybe we can't help them the way that they need, my mandate for my team is that they leave with something. They leave with some form of education or direction. And that's really what Elder Care Planners of Canada is built on. That if someone comes to me and they need help from somewhere else, I'm not going to just let them go by the wayside and figure it out. I'm going to find it for them, because our whole mission is to make their lives easier in elder care.
Nice. One of the things I know that helps a lot of families, that you wrote a book. And so tell us about your book, Breadcrumbs.
Sure. So Breadcrumbs was really a compilation of my stories from being an elder care planner, and also some extra information for caregivers. And then there's some Ontario very specific information about retirement living, long-term care, just to give a bit of a nuance to that. And I use it for examples. And so the book is really to meet people where they are. So we spoke about education. There's lots of readers. There's lots of people that don't want to call anybody and they're not ready. And if I can sneak a book into their, nightstand, and they can read about it and start knowing that they're really not alone. And we're all just learning this system. Long-term care homes haven't been around that long, maybe since the 60s. And so we're all just learning it. There's just not enough generations of knowledge yet. And so this is one way to be able to meet people where they are, where they can just read it on their own time. They don't have to talk to anyone. They don't have to look for anything. They just have some extra knowledge. And I'm hoping at the end of the day, they really understand that they're really not the only ones dealing with this stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Amy Friesen from Tea and Toast, for providing us with this great information and just kind of the compare and contrast to what we do in the United States. Check out her book, Breadcrumbs. That's something you can get on Amazon.
You can.
Also on your website. And the website is www.teaandtoast.ca. So if you're in the United States, don't confuse it with .com. It's .ca. And you can also find her on Instagram at instagram.com/teaandtoastottawa. And it was great to talk to you, Amy. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners?
Just that, pre-planning does make quite a difference. And It's so much easier. Although people aren't there yet in the thinking, it's much easier to pre-plan than to react in a crisis. So make sure that you're putting things together now when you have the time to do it.
Thanks so much, Amy from Tea and Toast. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe. You can find us at Advice from Your Advocates at any place that you listen to podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube if you want to watch us talk in addition to hear us, or you can go to our website at mannorlawgroup.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, visit mannorlawgroup.com.